Hey, and welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Got a lot to get to this hour. A little bit later on in the hour, we'll give you the update on Brexit, which is really getting intense over there. It looks like a snap election may be in the works over in Britain. But we bring you first the latest on the American 2020 election. There is a new poll out from IBD-TIPP, and it shows that Joe Biden remains the Democratic frontrunner, according to IBD. But Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is now within 4 points of the former VP in September's IBD-TIPP poll. Now, again, the polls are a little bit all over the place when it comes to election 2020 and the primaries. So there's this Economist YouGov poll, and that one shows Biden up just 4 at 26 to 22 over Elizabeth Warren. But the same morning, you have one coming out from Politico Morning Consult that shows Biden up 32 to 20 over Bernie Sanders and Warren down at 16. And then you got the IBD-TIPP poll, which has Biden up just 4. The Economist and IBD-TIPP have been tracking each other lately. All the other polls tend to show this much wider gap. Who do you believe? Well, I will say that IBD and TIPP were the best polling source during the 2016 election, which is bad news for Joe Biden. According to Investors Business Daily, Biden remains the surest choice in the 2020 election versus President Trump, with a 12-point advantage in a head-to-head matchup. Warren, however, only has a narrow 3-point edge, which means that Trump is in pretty good shape against Elizabeth Warren, because remember, Elizabeth Warren hadn't run a campaign yet. Elizabeth Warren is really getting the boffo burnishing treatment from the media. I mean, they are out there buffing and shining her like Mr. Miyagi. It's incredible. I mean, they are out there to make Elizabeth Warren seem absolutely wonderful. And as we covered on yesterday's show, she's basically now a down-the-line, progressive Bernie Sanders type when she used to actually be kind of interesting. So according to that IBD-TIPP poll, Joe Biden's support is down from 30 to 28. Elizabeth Warren rose 7 points from 17 in August to 24 in September. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders unchanged from August at 12, and Kamala Harris continues to sink all the way down to 6%. Buttigieg stuck at 5 despite all the media attention. Cory Booker is up to 4%, and he brought his angry eyes. No other candidate polls more than 1%. In a head-to-head 2020 election contest, Biden versus Trump, the IBD-TIPP poll finds a 54 to 42 advantage for Biden. That's pretty consistent. A month earlier, Biden was up on Trump by about 13 points. However, when it looks at Sanders and Warren and Harris, then it's much narrower. Sanders in this poll had a narrow 49-45 edge over Trump. Warren and Harris were at 49 to 46 over Trump. Now, among independents, Biden just skunks Trump in this poll. Among independents, Biden is up on Trump 55 to 37. Among independents, Warren only edges Trump by 2%, and that is unlikely to continue as people see more of Elizabeth Warren. She ages well in a Democratic primary. I do not know that she ages well in a general election, specifically because her economic plans are bat bleep loony. I mean, her economic plans are fully crazy. She's talking about basically paying off everybody's college tuition. She's talking about a Green New Deal. She's talking about universal pre-K. She's talking about spending upon spending upon spending, and her proposal is an unconstitutional wealth tax to fund all of that, which is never going to pass or happen. Warren is in the lead among whites and liberals. Again, Biden's support base remains among minorities. Biden is at 28% support among both women and men. Warren is now running at 27% among women, so she's tying with Biden, but she's only at 19% among men. Among white voters, Warren is the favorite. So Warren, just like Bernie Sanders, was earning disproportionate white support, so is Elizabeth Warren. She's got 26% support to Biden's 24 and 14% for Sanders. Now, the bad news for Biden is that the first 2 states are super white. Iowa and New Hampshire are super duper white. But polling by IBD shows that Warren is trailing both Biden and Sanders in New Hampshire still. So she really does need to win Iowa. Among self-described liberals, she is now up 35 to 18 for Biden and 14 for Sanders. But among blacks, Hispanics, and older voters, Biden dominates. He has 33% support to 19 for Warren and 10% for Bernie. Support for Biden is tepid among younger voters. So this spells, I think, victory for Elizabeth Warren in Iowa. Can she carry that forward all the way through New Hampshire? She's polling surprisingly not strong in a state that neighbors her own. So it may actually be bad news for Democrats that Elizabeth Warren is running strong in the primaries. If she wins the nomination, she's less likely to beat Trump by leaps and bounds than Joe Biden is. Now, meanwhile, some bad news for President Trump on the economic front. Obviously, if the economy were to take a dive or seriously slow before the election, that is a major problem for President Trump, which is one of the reasons why the Trump campaign is so suspicious that many folks on the left are talking down the economy in advance of the election, obviously. Now, Trump has been calling on the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates again to sort of jog economic growth. But the Fed is reluctant to do that, I think rightly so, because they don't want to spur inflation. The Boston Fed president, Eric Rosengren, basically announced that he'd vote against a rate cut earlier on Tuesday. According to Heather Long reporting for the Washington Post, shortly after President Trump fired off a tweet on Tuesday urging the Federal Reserve to boost the economy by slashing interest rates, Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren said cutting rates now would be a mistake. Top Fed officials, including Rosengren, will meet September 18th to determine if interest rates should decline or stay the same. Now, Trump has been making the simultaneous and nonsensical argument that the fundamentals of the economy are strong, but we do need to lower the interest rates in order to what? Spur the economy ahead of the election? Trump has tweeted some 34 times in the past month demanding that the Fed lower the funds rate by a significant amount as recession fears have risen. Fed officials remain divided on whether even a modest cut is warranted. Rosengren said, "This isn't a free lunch. There are costs to accommodating at a time when the economy is doing reasonably well." In other words, the Fed really only has one tool available for when the economy goes bad, and that is to lower interest rates. And when people aren't spending enough, the Fed lowers the interest rates. When the economy slows, the Fed lowers the interest rates. The Fed tries to pump up the economy with a little bit of inflation. Right? That is the goal of the Fed. Well, if you take away that tool, if the interest rates are already at zero and then recession hits, where exactly do you go from there? You end up in a position very often, as Europe is showing, where you end up with negative interest rates. We're basically paying people to borrow. Rosengren says the U.S. economy is in a relatively strong place with low unemployment, rising wages, and a solid growth driven by consumer spending. He said he doesn't see the need for lower interest rates until there are clearer signs of distress from the trade war on consumers. If the Fed were to lower rates too soon, he's worried that they wouldn't have any firepower left to fight the bigger problems later on. And this is indeed the problem. Now, we've had on this program Mohamed El-Erian, the head of Allianz, and he has stated, and I think quite rightly, that policymakers are now too dependent on central banks. Now, Rand Paul has long stated that the Fed is a political organ, and that we should audit the Fed to see exactly what savings the Fed holds, to see exactly how the Fed works. That's true. The Fed is basically unanswerable. With that said, the Fed was always seen as sort of the policymaker of last resort. Now it's the policymaker of first resort. People who are in the stock market sit around waiting to read the tea leaves from random individuals who are members of the Fed. The benchmark U.S. interest rate is just shy of 2.25%, which is indeed a low level by historical standards. Trump wants it at 1.25%. He tweeted on Tuesday, "Germany and so many other countries have negative interest rates. They get paid for loaning money. Our Federal Reserve fails to act. Remember, these are also our weak currency competitors." Well, inflating the currency doesn't make your economy stronger, dude. Inflating the currency is usually a sign of economic weakness. Now, maybe you want to weaken the American currency to make our products more competitive on foreign markets. Is that the idea here? Make it more expensive to import products from foreign markets? But that really hurts domestic consumers and hurts those who have had the wherewithal to save money. Trump wants the stock market to climb. In August, the president tweeted repeated insults at Fed Chair Jerome H. Powell, calling Powell an enemy, a golfer who can't putt, and someone with horrendous lack of vision. Experts are divided on whether the nation is likely to slip into a downturn by 2021. The manufacturing sector is already in a recession. Business spending is drying up amid the trade war, and the bond market is signaling trouble ahead, but stocks remain near record highs, and companies are continuing to hire, and consumers are still spending. So a lot of this trepidation is driven by China. It's driven by the EU. But in America, we have a very large consumer market. There are not a lot of signs that the American economy is about to plunge into a recession, maybe a mild slowdown. Now, in a second, we'll get to how President Trump is hoping to shore up his hopes politically. The answer? He's moving to build that wall. We'll talk about it in just 1 second. First, if you've ever been hacked in the past and somebody has stolen your data, it is not a pleasant experience. I've had my credit card number hacked in the past, and really, just a few years ago, I looked at my credit card bill a few months after the fact, and all of a sudden I saw, wait a second, who bought 1 million NFL tickets? Like, I've been to one NFL game in my entire life. Turns out somebody had hacked us. We had to change all our credit cards. It was a giant pain in the ass. This is true for so many people. Well, if you are sick of people hacking you or big tech grabbing your data or the government monitoring you, well, you should really try out a VPN. And the people I trust are the folks over at ExpressVPN. You should be using ExpressVPN every time you go online. Tech companies can use that IP address to match your internet activity to your identity or location. When I use ExpressVPN, search engines and media sites can't see my IP address at all. My identity is masked and anonymized. ExpressVPN has the added benefit of encrypting 100% of your data to keep you safe from people who you don't want to have your data. ExpressVPN software takes just a minute to set up on your computer or phone. You tap one button, and you are now protected. So if you're like me, and you believe your data should belong to you, not hackers or anybody else, check out expressvpn.com. And when you go to expressvpn.com/Ben, you get an exclusive offer. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. You get 3 months for free with a 1-year package. Again, that's expressvpn.com/Ben to get started. Solid deal for keeping your data safe the way you should. Okay, so President Trump is trying to make a pitch for re-election, and that pitch does depend in some part on keeping his biggest promise, which is to build that wall. Paul Sun and Seung-Min Kim reporting for the Washington Post. The Pentagon has now approved a diversion of military construction funds for the Trump wall. Defense Secretary Mark Esper agreed on Tuesday to free up $3.6 billion from the Pentagon budget for President Trump's border wall by effectively defunding 127 military construction projects using emergency authorities. Now, there is statutory authority to do this. We talked about this back when Trump was talking about declaring a national emergency. I pointed out he doesn't actually have to do this. There are already provisions of American law that allow him to redirect to shoring up existing wall and building new wall. Esper determined that the use of military construction funds was necessary to support American forces deployed to the southern border with Mexico under the national emergency that Trump declared in mid-February. The formal determination allows Trump, under an obscure statute in the federal code overseeing the military, to tap the funds appropriated for other purposes without any sign-off from Congress. Again, I think that case is a little bit legally dicey, given the fact that Congress did sound off and say they deliberately do not want that money spent on the border. But Defense Secretary going to move forward with it anyway. The Pentagon declined to disclose which projects would be defunded because they don't want that used as a weapon, presumably against the Defense Department and President Trump. During a briefing on Tuesday, top Pentagon officials said that the $3.6 billion will fund 11 projects, providing 175 miles of new or reconstructed wall along the border with Mexico and help reduce the need for American troops deployed there. Now, there is that, provision there that says new or reconstructed wall. That should make people a little bit nervous. You need new wall, not just reconstructed. Barriers will be reinforced or replaced with bigger walls in some places. Some stretches of wall will be built in other locations. They're going to build a wall along the U.S. military's Barry Goldwater bombing range in Arizona, which abuts the border with Mexico, according to officials. The spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security said that the funding will go to adding significantly new capabilities to DHS's ability to prevent illegal entry. In areas where we go from, say, a vehicle barrier to a 30-foot wall, we have a significantly new set of capabilities that didn't exist previously. About half of the $3.6 billion will come from projects within the United States and its territories. The other half will come from projects the U.S. military was planning in foreign countries. The Pentagon says the projects aren't being canceled, and they won't be delayed so long as Congress backfills the funds and, again, appropriates the money to them. And this is where Congress makes the case, guys, we appropriated the funds for those other projects, not for the wall. Why would we fill in the gap now? The answer is you should have filled in the gap before. The truth is that there was a deal on the table a couple of years ago that basically would have traded the wall for the gradual legalization of many of the dreamers. It was a fairly good deal, and Trump sunk it at the last moment. That was a mistake. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, of course, is mad. She says the administration's irresponsible decision to transfer funds from appropriated U.S. military construction makes America feel less safe and dishonors the Constitution. Well, I'm pretty sure that the wall makes us feel a little more safe, actually. She says the president is negating the Constitution's most fundamental principle, the separation of powers. Ah, yes, I remember when Nancy Pelosi was deeply upset by Barack Obama unilaterally declaring he no longer had to enforce immigration law. One of the great joys of watching the political discourse is watching people who cared about checks and balances 5 minutes ago no longer care about it now, and vice versa. It's really wonderful to watch. Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island is a ranking Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He said that future presidents would try to tap money for their own desired initiatives through emergency declarations, which, of course, is probably true, which is why I was not in favor of the national emergency declaration in the first place. There are other provisions that do allow Trump some authority to do this sort of stuff. With that said, Trump is obviously trying to fulfill this promise in advance of the election. And maybe he gets it done. If he does, that is certainly a point in his political favor, even if I disagree with how he goes about doing it. Okay, in just a second, we're going to get into the situation in Britain, which is heating up over Brexit. Plus, in just a little while, we will be taking your phone calls every day. We do a phone frenzy, and that is coming up. Check us out at 855-236-3228, 855-236-3228. Give us a call, and we will take your questions coming up. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So things are getting hot and heavy over in Britain over Brexit. So as you recall, last we checked, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, he had made a move just a week ago to prorogue Parliament, which basically suspends them a little bit early, like 5 days early. And the idea was to prevent people from coalescing around a plan to stop Brexit. He wanted a no-deal Brexit to go forward on October 31st or some sort of deal to be cut quickly. Well, now Parliament is pushing back. According to the New York Times, British lawmakers on Tuesday rose up against Prime Minister Johnson, moving to prevent him from taking the country out of the EU without a formal agreement. The epic showdown pushed Britain to the verge of a new election. After losing his first ever vote as Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson stood up in Parliament and said he intended to present a formal request for a snap general election to lawmakers who would have to approve it. So he's saying, listen, you don't want to make a deal with me over Brexit? I have a solution for you. We'll have a new election, and we'll see how that goes for you. A little over a month ago, Johnson swept into office with a vow to finally wrest Britain from the European Union by whatever means necessary, even if it meant a disorderly no-deal departure. Now, Parliament has pulled the rug out from under him. Johnson is at risk of falling into the same Brexit quagmire that dragged down Theresa May, his predecessor. The lawmakers forced his hand by voting 328 to 301 to take control of Parliament away from the government and vote on legislation as soon as Wednesday that would block the Prime Minister from making good on his threat of a no-deal Brexit. Johnson said, I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October 17th to sort this out and take this country forward. He's referring to the next EU summit. Tuesday was a critical moment, says the New York Times, in Britain's tortured 3-year effort to extract itself from the European Union. The saga has divided Britons, torn apart the ruling Conservative Party, and prompted complaints that Johnson has trampled the conventions of the country's unwritten constitution. Of course, that's not true. Many prime ministers have prorogued Parliament before. A majority of lawmakers are determined to block a withdrawal from the EU without a deal. They believe that would be disastrous for the country's economy. Tuesday's vote suggested they have the numbers to succeed. Johnson's aides made it clear that in the event of a defeat on Tuesday, he would seek a general election on October 14th. Just a little over 2 weeks before the Brexit deadline of October 31st. Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition leader, said he would agree to an election only after Parliament passed legislation barring a no-deal Brexit altogether. The House of Commons was expected to approve the measure on Wednesday, so the deal is that he would trade the Conservative Party a new election in exchange for legislation barring a no-deal Brexit. On a day of high drama, Johnson lost his working majority in Parliament even before the vote took place. One conservative rebel, Philip Lee, quit the party and joined the Liberal Democrats, who have managed to stage a resurgence by positioning themselves as an unambiguously anti-Brexit party. The practical effect was limited because the government only falls if there's a no-confidence motion. But in a moment weighty with symbolism, Lee walked across the floor of the House of Commons and sat beside Joe Swinson, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, as the Prime Minister was speaking about the recent Group of Seven summit. Lee accused Johnson of pursuing a damaging withdrawal from the EU in unprincipled ways and putting lives and livelihoods at risk. On Tuesday night, Downing Street began pressing ahead with plans to discipline the rebels within the party who voted against the government, moving to expel them from the Conservative Party. That includes 2 former chancellors of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond and Kenneth Clarke, and Nicholas Soames, the grandson of Winston Churchill. That could threaten Johnson's ability to manage day-to-day business in Parliament, which would underscore the need for a new election. And Johnson wants the new election because he understands that if he runs as an unambiguously pro-Brexit prime minister, he will win the vast majority of conservative votes, and he'll pick up all of the Brexit party votes as well. So people are portraying this as though Johnson lost. Listen, I think Johnson knew this was coming, and that is why he's calling for a snap election. He's saying, okay, you really want to make Jeremy Corbyn the prime minister of Great Britain? This old commie anti-Semite, that's the guy you want to be prime minister of Great Britain? And he has been ripping incessantly on Jeremy Corbyn. He appealed to his own lawmakers not to support what he called Jeremy Corbyn's surrender bill. He says it means running up a white flag. Also, Johnson claimed that he was making progress with the EU leaders. Britain's main demand is that the EU ditch the so-called Irish backstop, which was a guarantee that the bloc insisted they needed to ensure that goods flow smoothly across the Irish border, whatever happens in trade negotiations with Britain. And the big problem is that part of the island of Ireland would prefer to remain in the EU, part would not. And if Britain exits the EU, well then, how exactly are goods going to be traded over the border within Ireland? Conservative rebels believe Johnson is more interested in uniting Brexit supporters behind him ahead of a general election than in securing an agreement in Brussels, which is probably true. But so what? And so Johnson is saying, fine, let's make this official. Let's do a snap election, and then we'll find out once and for all whether I have a working majority to finally press through a Brexit deal or not. Because right now, he's basically been handed a mandate with not enough people to back his mandate. So that is the latest on Brexit. People are portraying this as though Johnson was outplayed. I really, really doubt that. Coming up, we're going to be taking your calls, 855-236-3228. That's 855-236-3228. We'll get to those calls. Plus, in a little while, we're having on a student who was suspended from his school for the great sin of going shooting with his mom. We'll talk about that. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Well, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, so fresh, so face. I mean, endless amounts of both freshness and faceness and face freshness and all that. She got very upset with Dan Crenshaw. Why? Well, our friend, the congressperson from Texas, he tweeted out that there's a story that he tweeted about in which a woman was trying to defend herself and against 5 men. She had a handgun and she fired at them and one suspect was shot and she is fine. So Dan Crenshaw tweeted out, situations like this story are why we protect the Second Amendment. Side note, with universal background checks, I wouldn't be able to let my friends borrow my handgun when they travel alone like this. We would make felons out of people just for defending themselves. Meaning, let's say I have a female friend who is traveling to an unsafe area and I trust her with a gun. I could give her the gun under normal law. Well, you create universal background checks and now I would have to put her through some sort of background check. AOC, not understanding how English works, she tweeted out, "You are a member of Congress. Why are you lending guns to people unsupervised who can't pass a basic background check?" Okay, that's not what he said. He literally did not say that. He said that he might have to lend a gun to someone who does not have one, but probably could pass a background check, I would assume, if they're friends with Dan Crenshaw, that he would lend them a gun on short notice to do things. She says, "The people you're giving a gun to have likely abused their spouse or have a violent criminal record, and you may not know it. Why on earth would you do that?" Because he wouldn't, and you're stupid, is the answer. Because AOC is a stupid human with stupid ideas and a brain that does not work properly. Dan Crenshaw tweeted back, "Just so I'm clear, you think my friends are domestic abusers/criminals? Seriously? That's your argument? That they can't pass a background check? Wrong. People lend guns to friends, especially if they don't own a gun, for self-defense and hunting purposes. This is America outside New York City." My friend Noah Rothman over at Commentary Magazine, who is certainly not, I would say, a big hunting dude from Arkansas or anything. He says, "I've only lived in Sapphire Blue, New Jersey. When you have to put down a varmint that's eating neighborhood pets, you borrow your neighbor's 22 to do it. This isn't even real America bravado. It's just life." It is obvious, by the way, that she does not understand her own law. Liz Mayer tweeted out, "Are you seriously saying you want every American to have access to background check systems just in case they want to lend a gun to their sibling and not be held liable should something bad happen? That is a civil liberties disaster waiting to happen." Well, yes, but AOC's ideas are usually a disaster waiting to happen or just a disaster that has already happened. All right, time to take some of your phone calls at 855-236-3228. It's time for a phone frenzy, so let's do this thing. Mike in New York, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Mike.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. Go for it, sir.
Good, yeah. I know you mentioned this before, but also as far as the Michelle Obama coming into the election. I mean, the Obamas are very, very quiet going forward. Do you think? I mean, is it a possibility at all?
Yeah, Mike.
I think like when she jumps in,
you know, I think it's deeply unlikely that Michelle Obama jumps into the race. There's every election cycle. There's talk about somebody bigfooting and jumping into the race late. In the last election cycle, there was a lot of talk about some other figure. There was talk about Michelle last time, actually, in 2016 when Hillary was kind of lackluster. There was talk in 2012 about Hillary Clinton jumping in if Barack Obama started to fade. So there's always talk about various Democrats jumping in. I don't get the impression that Michelle Obama wants in right now, especially because the risk of losing to Donald Trump. I mean, can you imagine how that would ruin the Obama family if Michelle Obama were to run against Donald Trump and somehow lose? Now, listen, would she be a dangerous candidate? Absolutely. I mean, this is a woman who just sold, I think, 10 million copies of her book. I can pat myself on the back when I say that mine was the first nonfiction book to knock her off the top of the New York Times bestseller list for something like a year. But the fact is that she is a formidable political figure if she chooses to do something, but she's not jumping in right now, much to the Democrats' chagrin. Mike, thanks so much for the call. Annie in Arkansas, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Annie.
Hi, Ben. So my question is, so why does the left propose to stand for equality between ethnic groups when they target Asians through their own policies, like the SAT adversity score? And doesn't this like countervail against their agenda, which is that America is a racist country and they are not racist?
This is 100%, Annie. I mean, the reason why Asians are not considered a minority in the United States anymore is because Asians are disproportionately well-educated and successful. For the same reason that Jews used to be considered a minority, and then Jews were well-educated and successful and were no longer considered a minority. In fact, the left's perspective on racial minorities is that they now get to be considered part of the majority based on their level of success, which, of course, is deeply derogatory toward many minority groups. I mean, to be judged based on your membership in a minority group, not on your status as an individual or your performance as an individual, and to deride various minority groups or disadvantage various minority groups because they have achieved too much is bizarre. I mean, we saw this at Harvard University, where Harvard has been systematically discriminating against against Asian students. I mean, Asians, again, have a long history of being discriminated against in the United States. And the fact that Asians are treated as a non-minority group is just evidence that for the left, this is really more about a Marxist attempt to level all outcomes rather than deep care and concern for minority groups in general. Because as soon as a minority group does well, they're no longer considered a minority group. Now they're part of the white privileged class, I suppose. Annie, thanks so much for the call. Ben, calling all the way from Israel. So you must be listening online, I assume. Ben, thanks so much for joining the show. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. This is a great moment. I just wanted to know, I know you always talk about the difference between someone who's born Jewish, someone who's Jewish, does the Jewish religion, and the same assuming is by all religions. I was just wondering, like, well, I'm an Israelite. There's plenty of Jewish voices here who keep like some of the commandments, some keep something more than others. What would you consider like a Jewish person, someone to follow for your Jewish beliefs?
So, Benton, this is a great question. Obviously, there are gradations in terms of Jewish practice. I think a lot of people ask this question because I make a very hard distinction between what I call ethnic Judaism and religious Judaism, or philosophical Judaism, or even identification as a Jew. I think that it is easier to do it the other way. People who consider themselves only ethnic Jews are people who are atheists, people who deride Judaism, people who believe that Judaism is myth-making or a fairy tale. It's fair to say that those people were just born into a Jewish family. Now, among other Jews, there are people who deride Judaism to a certain extent, pretend that it is old-fashioned, but they still consider themselves culturally Jewish. I don't care much about cultural Judaism, meaning I eat matzo balls and I like Fiddler on the Roof. That doesn't make any difference to me. As far as religious practice, if you're trying to do anything, then my feeling is that you are at least operating within the realm of religious Judaism. Now, obviously, there are levels of that. I mean, levels going all the way up to Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is generally defined by you keep Shabbat and you keep kosher. But my entire extended family is obviously, kind of culturally Jewish more than religiously Jewish, but at least they identify as Jewish and see a certain solidarity in Judaic religion and practice. So I guess that, I sort of define everybody religious, non-religious, politically, non-politically in the way that my father did. My father always taught us that in life, it's not about where you stand, it's about which direction you're moving. If you're moving in the direction of more religious practice or more religious philosophy, then I think it's fair to consider you part of that circle. If you're moving away, then I think that it's unfair to consider you part of that circle. Ben, I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Ted in Long Island, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Ted.
Hey, Ben, how are you? I'm a new listener, and I really love the show. I wanted to speak to you about the trade/Cold War with China and your opinion on it.
Sure, go for it. So, I mean, I think, do you have a specific question on it?
Yes. Well, I see China stealing intellectual property, supporting North Korea, threatening India with no historical claim. I don't see the left calling anything out on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think, Ted, that it is a mistake to treat what is going on with China as a mere trade war. And this has been my criticism of President Trump on the trade war, is he put it in context. Like, I think he should have done a full address. I think there should have been an attempt to put in context what the trade war represents. What exactly are our interests vis-a-vis China? What exactly are we attempting to do against China? Is this part of a broader geopolitical strategy, or is this just that Trump is mad about the trade deficit and is slapping tariffs on China in order to fight it? Because from an economic perspective, that doesn't make a lot of sense. A tariff war doesn't make sense. A tariff that is placed on an unfriendly government as part of a broader Cold War, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, that's effectively what the United States did with the USSR for years. This is why I've been calling on President Trump to contextualize what exactly he's doing here. And I think that would be totally appropriate, by the way. I think that if we were to have a harsh China policy, just in general, and the trade war were part of that policy, that makes a lot more sense than just, we're mad at China, don't like the trade deficit, here's a tariff.
Agreed.
Well, I really appreciate it, Ted. Thanks so much for the call. Nicholas, calling from Pittsburgh. You're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Nicholas.
Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Doing well. Go for it, sir.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what as a common man with no real platform, what can I do to come up against Walmart and their ridiculous policy? As somebody who just wants to be able to buy ammo and their coffee and clothes all in the same place, what can I do, or what can the common man do to combat this ridiculous new policy that they have with the ammo?
I mean, I think first of all, we do have to make our voices heard to the Walmart executives. I think that the left has extraordinarily loud voices that are out there in the media, basically proclaiming that if Walmart doesn't do their bidding, then they are going to do something to Walmart's bottom line. They're going to shame them publicly. They're going to go after them. I think that, unfortunately, the only way to stop this is mutually assured destruction, meaning I think that you need to call up your local Walmart and register a complaint. You need to maybe start looking at other places to shop. In the long run, that is what's going to happen. I think the conservatives are going to be forced to look to alternative methods of distribution because they can't simply allow corporations to operate along the lines the left wants them to operate and then still give them their profit. If only one side is playing that game, then that side is going to win. And right now, only one side is playing that game. I would prefer no sides play this game. I think the game is stupid, right? I feel sort of like the Whopper at the end of war games. The only winning solution here is not to play. But at the same time, if the left is going to play this game where they try to hijack corporations into doing their bidding, the right has no other real available response other than to make clear to Walmart that we'll take our shopping elsewhere. And there are a lot of us. I mean, I think that if they understand that they're going to see a dent in their bottom line, and we say this on Twitter and we say this on Facebook, they have people monitoring social media. They have to know, other companies have to know that if they decide to take sides with the left, that they are taking sides against an entire group of people. Nicholas, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for your call. We'll get to more of your calls in just a moment at 855-236-3228. But first, let's talk about your sleep quality. So perhaps you're like me and you've been having a tough time sleeping of late. Well, if you've had a tough time sleeping of late, for me, it's because I've been traveling some, and it's because I haven't been getting to bed on time. But when I do get into bed, I need a really, really comfortable mattress. And this is why I love my Helix Sleep mattress. Helix Sleep has built a sleep quiz. It takes 2 minutes to complete. They use the answers to match your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress. Whether you're a side sleeper or a hot sleeper, whether you like a plush or a firm bed, with Helix, there's no more guessing and no more compromising on an average mattress. Go to helixsleep.com/Shapiro. Take their 2-minute sleep quiz. They will match you to a mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. Helix Sleep was even awarded the #1 best overall mattress pick of 2019 by both GQ and Wired Magazine, which makes sense because their mattresses are indeed incredibly, incredibly comfortable. They have a 10-year warranty. You get to try your mattress out for 100 nights risk-free. Shipping is completely free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but I promise you will. Right now, Helix is offering up to $125 off all mattress orders. Get up to $125 off at helixsleep.com/Shapiro. That's helixsleep.com/Shapiro. Chris in Charlotte, North Carolina, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Chris.
Hey, Ben, do you think that Dave Chappelle might be just the right guy at just the right time to stand up to this politically correct nonsense, given that he's already proven that he really doesn't care that much about his career? He took that hiatus for however long he did. And he's already got $50 million in the bank or whatever, so maybe he's just the guy to bust this thing up.
Yeah, no, I'm really hoping that's right, Chris. I think that you're seeing this from a lot of comedians. As I've been saying over the past couple of days, I think that the world of comedy is going to be the first that runs up against the restraints and the strictures of the nasty Wokescold left. And you're seeing this with Chappelle and even people who are very liberal. Aziz Ansari, he has a special on Netflix. Most of the special is dedicated to how annoying Wokescolds are. You know, the left is beginning to wake. Sarah Silverman, who's as far left as it's possible to be, is annoyed by the Wokescold censorship and policing. So I think that the comedic world is going to be the first to recognize that the humorless world of Hannah Gadsby is actually a terrible place to live. And Chappelle might be an important figure in that. In fact, I think the left realizes he's an important figure in that. And that's why a lot of the critics are going after him so hard right now for having violated their sense of propriety. Chris, thanks so much for the call. Let's see. Moses in New Jersey, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Ben? Thank you so much for taking my call, my friend.
Absolutely.
So basically, the one thing that I've gotten from just a back and forth and how Republicans and Democrats debate is that Democrats cannot actually defend their positions. They cannot debate. So what needs to happen, I believe, is that they need to be forced into debate against people they will not be able to win against. So a perfect example, and my question is, why isn't the Republicans and also the president, what he should be doing is allowing the people that are actually briefing him in regards to crime, in regards to immigration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a former Marine myself and former Homeland Security employee.
Well, thank you,
Why
sir.
is the president not seizing this opportunity to allow his platform to be shared? Let's say, for example, a live town hall.
Moses, it's such a great
allowing the
question.
men and women that are on that border to actually brief the American people and give the briefing to the American people that the president essentially gets and force the Democrats to defend their positions.
Yeah, Moses, first of all, thank you for everything that you've done for the country. Second of all, I totally agree with this. And I wish that the president didn't have an ego problem and were willing to delegate the task of communicating to the people who are communicating to him. I think the president, unfortunately, doesn't very much like when other people are on magazine covers or getting a lot of camera time. But the fact is that he has a lot of people working for him who are better communicators than he is. And it seems like common sense to do exactly what you're talking about. Why not have border agents talking about the situation on the border? Why not have police officers talking about the situation with crime in our inner cities? Right? That seems like a perfectly good idea. I'd love to see the president take you up on that, Moses. All righty. Coming up, we're going to be joined by a student who is basically suspended from school for the great crime of going shooting with his mom. Yes, this is the direction the left would like to take the country. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So say that you decided that you were going to go shooting with a parent or a relative, and you decided to post a picture on one of your social media profiles. Would you expect that your school would then suspend you? Well, this is exactly what happened to Nate Myers. His mom is Justine Myers. Both of them join us on the line right now. Nate is a junior at Loveland High School in Loveland, Colorado. Nate and Justine, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So, Nate, why don't you tell me what exactly happened here? Apparently, you posted a couple of photos of the guns that you were shooting after a fun day at the gun range on Snapchat, and then things started to go wrong.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, I got pulled out of school, and me me and my mom were going to go shooting up at the range, I believe in Red Feather. And so we get to her house. We're pulling out all the guns, setting them on the table. And I snapped a picture of them for Snapchat. None of them were loaded. They were all in their cases. And I put the caption, "Finna be lit," which means gonna be fun. And then we went to the range. The place we went didn't have any service when we were shooting. So on our way back, we got service for a second, and my dad was blowing up my mom's phone saying there was a cop at my house looking for me. And then my dad told us that he talked to the cop, explained to him that we were at the range, and then the cop that night deemed me not a threat. So I went home, went to bed, woke up the next morning, got ready for school, and as I'm walking out the door, my dad goes, "Hey, hold up, wait a minute. Listen to this." So, and then he had a voicemail from the district that said, "Your son, Nathan Myers, will not be allowed to attend Loveland High until further notice, until threat assessment is complete." So that's kind of what made us a little upset and confused. My mom then tried contacting the school to get my missing work and find out further information, and they denied both of those. And then my mom went on to some NRA groups and Pro 2A groups, and it kind of blew up. And then the school found out about it, and they scheduled the hearing for the next morning at 10 in the morning. So we went to that. I guess it was supposed to last an hour, but it only lasted 5 minutes. They kind of rushed us out of there. Like, we got in there. He gave me the work, went in, sat down, and they told it, "Oh, yeah, we never thought he was a threat. We never thought this." And then they claimed that they didn't know about it until 20 hours after.
So, Justine, I want to ask you about your family's relationship with guns and your sort of Second Amendment stance. So how old was Nate when you started shooting with him?
He was probably about 8 or 9.
And what kind of guns do you own in the house, and you know, how often do you go shooting?
We have an array of pistols, revolvers, rifles, kind of a lot. We go shooting as often as we can. We own a business, so our time is kind of limited, which is why I pulled him out of school that day. He works and I work, 90 hours a week at my business. So it kind of just was the perfect storm just to be like, okay, let's go now. Let's go shooting up there today.
So, Justine, what's the fallout been for your family, for your son, from all of this? Because obviously it was precipitous. People reacted in real time. Do you feel like the school handled this properly, or how could they better handle this in the future?
I feel like the school, they reacted to the safe to tell tip, which as a parent, I'm grateful that they did that, and I understand why they had to do so. But when the police officer had cleared him Tuesday night, it should have been squashed on Tuesday night. We should have never gotten to this point.
Well, Nate and Justine, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and telling your story. Obviously, listen, we all want schools to be cautious. We all want people to be notified if they think that there is a risk. But as you say, once the police have sounded off on something, to have the school continue to deny any sort of legal access to even going to school for your son is pretty absurd. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, in other law and order news, Juicy Smollett, as Dave Chappelle describes him, Jussie Smollett, is now angry at the Chicago PD. Why? Because they spent a lot of money to find his attackers. So he claimed that he was attacked by 2 white guys in red hats in the middle of the Chicago streets at 2 a.m. in the middle of a polar vortex. And the police took that seriously and investigated it. And now he's mad that they spent too much money trying to find out who did it, which is exactly what a person who's actually victimized in a crime would say. I know if I were victimized in a crime and then the police spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to find the person who did it, I'd be like, how dare they spend so much money and time trying to find out who victimized me? Or alternatively, maybe only a criminal says that, because it's the criminal who's on the other end of the investigation. Apparently, Smollett's latest court filing pins the decision to spend so much money on the police probe squarely on law enforcement. All their fault, guys. Well done, everybody. Alrighty, coming up, we are going to be talking about the left's gun control push, which is becoming more and more extreme. We're going to be talking about how that gun control push isn't just aimed at legislators anymore. Now they are aiming directly at corporations, and corporations are caving. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Hey, and welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Got a lot coming up for you this hour. In just a little while, we'll be getting to Dave Chappelle, who is now finding himself on the chopping block. Dave Chappelle canceled because he said politically incorrect things because he's a comedian, and we can't allow that to happen. That's got to stop. Plus, Alan Greenspan is now pushing for negative interest rates. This is probably not a good idea. You know, having the Federal Reserve be this in charge of the economy, it should scare Republicans, even if you think it helps President Trump. We'll get to that. But first, there is a story out from the Washington Post that should be at least mildly disquieting about what the White House is looking at with regard to gun control. Now, I sort of see the merit of what the White House is doing, and I also see the downside of what the White House is doing. Here is the story, and then we'll decide together. Jacqueline Alamany reporting. The White House is considering new projects seeking links between mental health and violent behavior. According to the Washington Post, the White House has been briefed on a proposal to develop a way to identify early signs of changes in people with mental illness that could lead to violent behavior. Supporters see the plan as a way President Trump could move the ball forward on gun control following recent mass shootings, as efforts seem to be flagging to impose harsher restrictions such as background checks on gun purchases. The proposal is part of a larger initiative to establish a new agency called the Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, or HARPA, which would sit inside the Health and Human Services Department. Its director would be appointed by the president. The agency would have a separate budget, according to three people with knowledge of conversations around the plan. HARPA would be modeled on DARPA, the highly successful Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency that serves as the research arm of the Pentagon and collaborates with other federal agencies, the private sector, and academia. The concept was advanced by the Susan Wright Foundation and first discussed by officials on the Domestic Policy Council and senior White House staffers in June 2017. So basically, the proposal is that we set up a new government agency, and their job is to suss out signs of early mental illness so that we can keep track of people and put red flags on them so they can't buy guns. The problem is, how do you determine what mental illness constitutes, and at what level can you remove guns from people? The Susan Wright Foundation reapproached the administration last week and proposed that HARPA include a safe home, stopping aberrant fatal events by helping overcome mental extremes project. Well, one of the things you got to love about legislation is that everyone has to come up with an insane acronym. I'm very much looking forward to the ultra pneumosilicovolcanoconiosis bill. There'll just be enough letters to make that happen. Officials discussed the proposal at the White House last week, said two people familiar with the discussions. The attempt to use volunteer data to identify neurobehavioral signs of someone headed toward a violent explosive act would be a 4-year project costing an estimated $40 to $60 million, according to Jeffrey Ling, the lead scientific advisor on HARPA. He says everybody would be a volunteer. We're not inventing new science. We're analyzing it so we can develop new approaches. So they will presumably create algorithms so they can look at the content you post on social media and then see how that lines up with the possibility of doing violence in the future. There are plenty of researchers and mental health experts who believe mental health and gun violence aren't necessarily linked. Mental illness can sometimes be a factor in such violent acts, experts say, but it is rarely a predictor. Most studies show that no more than a quarter of mass shooters have a diagnosed mental illness. More commonly shared attributes include a strong sense of resentment, desire for notoriety, obsession with other shooters, a history of domestic violence, narcissism, and access to firearms. Apparently, Trump has reacted very positively to the HARPA proposal, but it'll be interesting to see if Congress is willing to create a whole new agency behind all of this. It is also unclear how exactly, again, this is implemented. Let's say that HARPA actually creates a breakthrough technology with high specificity and sensitivity for early diagnosis of neuropsychiatric violence. How specific would that study have to be? I mean, after all, when you're talking about mass shooters, you're talking about a tiny, minute, infinitesimal, nearly non-existent percentage of the population on a statistical level. There are 330 million people in the United States. You're talking about a handful of people per year. How exactly do you create an algorithm that sensitive that you're able to weed out the people who are going to use a gun and shoot up a mall from the people who are just saying terrible things on social media, but are not actually going to do all of those things? The document actually lists a number of widely used technologies it suggests could be employed to help collect data. And here's where you get into the controversial provision. They're saying that you could use Apple Watches, Fitbits, Amazon Echo, and Google Home. Now, that's getting creepy. This is starting to look like Minority Report now. So if you're talking about just the data that people volunteer and put up on 4chan or 8chan or Facebook or Twitter, that's one thing. That is your fault for putting that data out there. If we are talking about private data being gathered by your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or your Google Home or Amazon Echo, that's scary stuff. Because the fact is, we all say ridiculous, crazy things in the privacy of our own homes. Do you really want some doctor going through everything that you say and trying to determine if you fit an algorithm so that your gun rights can be removed from you? I mean, that violates absolutely the Fourth Amendment. I mean, that is unreasonable search and seizure of data for sure. And the document also mentions powerful tools collected by healthcare providers like fMRIs, tractography, and image analysis. So this is going to be great. What, the government is going to have the power, presumably, to demand that your functional MRIs are used. Again, functional MRIs, by the way, are pretty inexact. Like, not to mention this for the 1 millionth time, my wife is a doctor. She does study neuropsychiatry. And fMRIs are really, really inexact. They're good at some things, and they are very not good at others. The notion that it can sort of read your brain is just not true. The document says advanced analytical tools based on artificial intelligence and machine learning are rapidly improving and must be applied to the data. Now, people familiar with the project stressed it would not collect sensitive health data about individuals without their permission. So they're saying this is preliminary. But you could certainly see a world where people in government push to start violating the Fourth Amendment in pursuit of exactly this data without your permission. And they say the government is simply trying to identify risk factors when it comes to mental health that could indicate violent behavior. They say privacy must be safeguarded, profiling must be avoided, data protection capabilities will be the cornerstone of this effort. But critics are deeply worried, and I think rightly so, about the power of government in this area. Now, if there's a voluntary study in which there are certain people who volunteer as sort of guinea pigs so that we can develop better algorithms, and then we can use public data about people to utilize those algorithms, then that seems less troublesome to me. And that's presumably what they are doing. Presumably that's what attracts President Trump. But there would be something obviously very scary about setting the precedent that the government, if only they had the capability of accessing your Amazon Echo, could know whether you're a potential shooter or not. How heavy would the political pressure be to violate the Fourth Amendment? That'd be some pretty scary stuff, obviously. Meanwhile, the left continues to exercise political pressure in every direction on gun control. The Washington Post has an absolutely absurd editorial targeting Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. It's called "How Many More Names Will Be Added to the List Before Mitch McConnell Acts on Guns?" And again, this is using the same old ridiculous contention that Mitch McConnell must not care about dead people because he doesn't approve the Washington Post pursuits on gun control. The editorial says, it names the individuals who were just killed in Midland and Odessa. It says, add those 7 individuals randomly slaughtered Saturday by a shooter in the West Texas cities of Midland and Odessa to the toll of those lost to America's gun insanity. Again, they were not lost to gun insanity. They were lost to an evil person who had a bunch of red flags. It's not about gun, what does that even mean, gun insanity? It's really absurd. I mean, it really is, because there are millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in America who are gun owners, who have a gun in the house, who are not insane and are not part of the quote-unquote gun insanity. But the Washington Post says, what if there was a mass shooting in the United States, not once or twice or 4 or 6 times monthly, but every single day? A big one, the kind that electrifies social media and squats for days on page 1. Would that be enough to move Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from his insistent inertia on gun safety? Would any volume of bloodshed convince the Kentucky Republican that Congress faces a moral imperative to act? I got to say, I am very, very bored with the idea from the media that there is a, quote, moral imperative to act when you do not specify which action would actually have prevented these shootings. They're saying something bad happened in my life. There is a moral imperative to act. A moral imperative to act to do what? Like, shouldn't you actually clarify what is the thing that is the moral imperative to do? And then they talk about how terrible it is that people have been shot. Agree. Then they say the list below, far from comprehensive, is tragic in part because it is so far from inevitable. No single law would end gun violence, but there are reasonable, obvious measures that would help. For example, ban the sale of military-grade assault weapons. Really, would that help? Let's see the studies that show that. Did it really help when there was a ban on quote-unquote assault weapons from 1994 to the early 2000s? Was that something that helped greatly? Because I'm not seeing the evidence for that. But again, the code word for we have no evidence is common sense when it comes to leftist policies. So we need common sense gun control. What they mean by common sense gun control is we like it, but we have no evidence to support it. They say these are unneeded by civilians. Really? An AR-15 is unneeded by a civilian? I feel like I might need an AR-15 to, protect me from a person trying to invade my house with an AR-15, of which there are tens of millions in circulation, by the way. And then this is such puerile writing. They're unneeded by civilians. They are a blight on the nation. Their ready availability a national disgrace. Okay, so thank you for using your thesaurus, but also can you make an argument? They say eliminating them would slow the growth of this list. Would it though? I mean, really? Like, do you have any evidence of that whatsoever? Eliminating the sale? Or are you all also for a full-scale gun confiscation? Is that the goal here? Because that's what Beto O'Rourke seems to want. So, again, the political pressure has nothing to do with reality or workable policy. It has to do with virtue signaling by the left, and really it has to do more with electoral politics, because the left fully understands that what they really want here is a full-scale gun confiscation and gun ban, but they're not going to call for it openly because that's politically unpopular. So instead, they just say things like, common sense gun regulation that involves the ban of sale of assault weapons for which there is no evidence. Yes, I'm sure. I definitely believe the Washington Post, which does not believe in the use of biological pronouns when it comes to common sense. I definitely think that those are the masters of common sense over there. Now, the left is not restricting its push merely to the world of politics. They're not merely going after elected officials. After all, they can't convince Mitch McConnell to do anything. He's not subject to the dictates of the Washington Post. He doesn't care what the editors over there say. He cares about his voters. And he cares about voters in other states that are backing senators of whom he is the leader, obviously. But the left has come up with a new strategy. And the new strategy is that you go after the vulnerable underbelly of American culture. And that is corporations. So the left hates corporations. Corporations are evil, the root of all evil, in fact. Corporations are corrupt. Corporations are bad. Corporations are trying to target the poor. CEOs are evil people. But also, corporations are our moral betters who should be cramming down policy on millions of Americans. They should be changing their policies to mirror the policy preferences of the left, not on the basis of an actual boycott, not on the basis of an actual attempt to avoid monetary damage, on the basis of a few blue check marks on Twitter, the editorial board at the Washington Post, and the folks over at MSNBC. The goal is they're going to pressure corporations to do what they can't get done at the government level. So they can't get gun control mandated at point of gun by the government. So instead, what they're going to do is they're going to pressure free market actors to abandon free market principles and start imposing policy preferences from above. Now, listen, that is their prerogative. They're allowed to do it. The First Amendment protects that activity, as it should. And corporations should be allowed to do what they want. They should be allowed to damage their own bottom line if they decide to do so because they're stupid. That's a them problem. And this will open up new market opportunities for gun retailers and ammo retailers who are not Walmart, for example, to simply compete in the industry. And Walmart will lose some money, and they will lose supporters. And over time, people will stop identifying with Walmart. People will stop feeling a brand loyalty to Walmart because they feel that Walmart doesn't have their back and is simply out there to do the bidding of the various editorial writers at newspapers around the United States. Walmart may not see that because they're seeking to avoid short-term damage, but they are actually doing long-term cultural damage because the inevitable byproduct of all of this is going to be the vast segregation of American life into conservative stores and liberal stores, into conservative entertainment and liberal entertainment. We're not going to be able to shop in the same places. We're not going to get the economies of scale. It will raise prices in certain areas, obviously. More importantly, it's going to lead to the self-segregation of the American public along political lines. Now, maybe you don't care about that, but that will have some really significant ramifications for politics, particularly because if you feel like the same people who are trying to prevent you from buying your ammo at Walmart are going to be in charge of the government and are going to come after the ammo in your safe at home, why would you ever want those people in charge of the government? Why wouldn't you see those people as tyrants coming after everything that you love? Why wouldn't you see them as people who want to control every aspect of your life? Because they do want to control every aspect of your life. They're not even relegating their desire for control to the area of government. They're doing it in the culture as well. Well, coming up, we're going to talk about Walmart's big decision to remove ammo from the shelves. Kroger is apparently following suit in preventing people from open carrying in states that allow open carry. We'll talk about all of that. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Well, I promise we will get to the issue of Walmart withdrawing ammo from its shelves at the behest of the woke left. We'll also get to the left attacking Dave Chappelle, the comedian who is not right-wing by any stretch of the imagination, but who also is not entranced with the Wokescolds, and they are not entranced with him anymore either. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, anytime I see a piece of audio that is labeled Bernie Sanders screams at baby or criticizes baby, I'm in. I mean, we got to play the audio. So Bernie was at some small event in New Hampshire, and a baby started screaming, and Bernie responded to the baby.
It's not easy getting up in front of a TV camera and talking about it. Ryan, did I hear you correctly say that you have to cut your pills in half yourself? Okay. If we could keep that down a little bit. Okay.
If you could stop that baby from being a baby, that would be great. Is abortion still legal? No? That baby's born? Okay. That baby reminds me, I don't know of who. The baby cries a lot, is bald, loves pudding, constantly wants things for free. Why? Wait a second. It's coming to me. By the way, speaking of wanting things for free, so Bernie Sanders got asked on the campaign trail by a Fox News reporter whether he was going to cancel all credit card debt. Now, I'm proud of this question because I first asked it on Twitter when Bernie was first saying, we'll cancel all student tuition. All of it that will go away. I was like, okay, well, why not just cancel all the credit card debt? We can stop bankruptcy in its track, guys. We'll cancel all the mortgages, all the credit card debt. It won't do it. It'll be just like that series, Mr. Robot, except it'll be a presidential plan from Bernie Sanders. So Bernie gets asked, would you cancel all the credit card debt? Bernie has no good answer because he's a crazed old socialist loon bag from the 1930s.
Running now in the general election against President Trump and the Republicans, and they're going to say what? Bernie Sanders wants to wipe out college loan debt. He wants to wipe out medical debt.
Yep.
What's next? Are you going to wipe out credit card debt? I mean, how do you push back against that?
I think there's a difference. No, okay. We're not here to talk about. I don't believe we wipe out credit card debt. If somebody comes down is diagnosed with a serious heart illness, and it happens to people every day, somebody in your family, your mother, your dad, is diagnosed and having to be treated with Alzheimer's, that's an expensive proposition. You go into debt, all right? I think that's a very different thing than saying, somebody wants to buy a fancy house or a fancy car. But I think as a nation, you raised a good question, Paul, and I think we have got to get our priorities right.
Okay, what if somebody wanted to buy a fancy education because he wants to relieve all that student loan debt? What a sucker I am. I paid off my own student loan debt in law school. Then I paid off all my wife's student loan debt. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars paying off the bills that we owed. What a sucker I am. Frankly, I don't understand why Bernie doesn't just come forward with that. I mean, as long as he's promising free stuff, why not just promise that the federal government, under modern monetary theory, will borrow all the money from China and the future to pay off all credit card debt? It's like 0 hour. Everybody just gets zeroed out. Why not do it? I mean, that's what Bernie presumably would like. Why not? By the way, when he says that people are using their credit cards to pay for fancy and expensive stuff, who would argue with him is Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, many of her early researches pointed out that people were not actually using their credit cards to buy super fancy deluxe items. Many people put their mortgage on their credit card. Many people were putting their car payments on their credit card. Many people were putting food and groceries on their credit card. It seems to me like all of those are more valuable expenses than your higher education in gender studies theory. So I'm still wondering why Bernie wouldn't support the abolition of credit card debt. After all, he's for everything else. By the way, this is the way the Democratic Party runs now. Tonight, they're having this big climate crisis town hall, and they're going to be talking about climate change. Ooh, nothing says stunning, wonderful TV, quite like several hours of climate change talk with Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. Can you wait for it? I can wait for it forever. I literally hope that the sun engulfs the earth before I have to watch that thing. But they're having this climate crisis town hall, and what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to get up there, and they're just going to outbid each other. It's just going to be like, I'm going to spend $8 trillion on climate change. Nope, I'm going to spend $10 trillion on climate change. I'm going to spend $16 trillion on climate change. It's basically the Democratic Party is a 60-year-old dude attempting to woo a 20-year-old in his convertible after 2 divorces. It's just a bunch of people sitting around past their prime talking about how much money they're going to spend on the hot chick they want to join them for the cash. Because how else to explain why none of these plans make any sense? They don't. Kamala Harris has a new big climate plan. Ooh, are you excited? It will cost $10 trillion. $10 trillion. And she's lowballing it, right? Because Bernie Sanders has promised $16 trillion, which means he cares more. The beautiful thing about being a Democratic Party politician is that all you have to do to show you care is say that you're going to spend a lot of money, other people's money. And I mean, I believe that Bernie Sanders cares the most because he's willing to spend the most money. Kamala Harris only cares $10 trillion worth. Bernie Sanders, that dude cares $16 trillion worth. Her announcement comes one day after 3 other Democratic candidates released climate plans, including Elizabeth Warren. Pete Buttigieg also put out a plan, but nobody paid attention to that because he's done. Joe Biden wants to spend $1.7 trillion, but Bernie Sanders is like, I'm going to go to infinity. Infinity is a number, right? We never stop spending money. It will be unbelievable. It's like I live off the teat of the American taxpayer, like a small human who's bald and screams a lot. Wait. Coming up, we're going to talk about Walmart dumping ammo. Bad policy. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Well, you know you're not doing great in the presidential race when you're downplaying expectations. Whenever you have a candidate who's like, well, I probably won't win here or here, you're like, yeah, you might not win anywhere. Well, now Joe Biden is doing that. According to Fox News, Joe Biden's presidential campaign this week seemed to downplay the importance of winning the typically crucial nominating contests in Iowa and New Hampshire, signaling the Democratic frontrunner's team anticipates a tough battle in those leadoff primary contests. That makes sense. If you look at the Real Clear Politics poll average, even this early, Iowa, it's Biden by 8, but basically Warren is running at 18% and Sanders at 14 and Harris at 14. And there haven't been a lot of polls there lately. New Hampshire, Biden is only up by 2 over Bernie Sanders. So he's probably not going to win either of those states. Or at best, he may pull out New Hampshire, maybe. The campaign still calls Iowa critical. The candidate himself says it holds the key to the kingdom, but a senior Biden official said that the former VP's campaign is already ramping up efforts in Super Tuesday states that vote at the beginning of March and beyond, according to Fox News. Asked specifically about the Iowa caucuses, the campaign official stressed, I think we'll win, but added, do I think it's a must-win? No. The official acknowledged, we know it's going to be a dogfight there. The same thing is true in New Hampshire. But in a possible move to lower expectations in New Hampshire, the Biden campaign pointed to the incredible home field advantage for a Massachusetts candidate or a New Englander, for that matter. So that's a reference, obviously, to Vermont and Massachusetts, the homes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, respectively. The campaign said they think there are probably 3 or 4 other candidates in the record-setting field of roughly 20 Democratic presidential contenders who are going to go for a while. They specifically mentioned Sanders, Warren, Kamala Harris, and Cory Booker, and Pete Buttigieg. Well, Buttigieg is just going to continue running because he has nothing better to do. What's he going to do? Go back to South Bend and be mayor? And then not be able to win a Senate seat? And then not be able to win a gubernatorial seat? Basically, this is Pete Buttigieg's moment of glory, and he hopes that one day he will be Secretary of Education in a Biden or Warren administration. Senior officials highlighted the strength of their campaign teams in Iowa and New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. They're touting their very solid footing in those crucial states. They say they're ramping up for Super Tuesday and beyond. Among the Super Tuesday states are the 2 most populous in the nation, California and Texas. And if Biden underperforms in either of those, he's got a problem. So this is a knife's edge thing for Joe Biden, and he continues to flag, which suggests that the momentum at this point lies with Elizabeth Warren. And meanwhile, the big story of the day continues to be that Walmart will no longer sell certain types of ammunition. In a letter to the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, and the House Minority Leader, the CEO of Walmart calls on them to regulate guns, and he says that he is going to pledge that his company will no longer distribute certain types of guns and certain types of ammunition. Now, this is a bad thing. It is a bad thing for the country. Why? Because when you have major corporations doing the bidding of a variety of left-wing activist groups, that is bad for the country, because then presumably conservatives will no longer shop in the same places that people on the left do. And if you extend this out, what you will end up with pretty quickly is a situation where conservatives and leftists have completely separate lives in the United States. They don't go to the same schools. They don't shop in the same places. They don't use the same kinds of credit cards. You basically have a 2-track system, voluntary political segregation. That is the predictable effect of what is going on here. And that's pretty bad for the culture, because there was no overwhelming sentiment that Walmart had to pull ammo from its shelves. No one was boycotting Walmart. A few check marks on Twitter and a few columnists for the New York Times were targeting Walmart, and Democratic candidates were targeting Walmart with the threat of regulation. And so they caved. And that's what corporations do. Everybody always says, oh, corporations, they're businesses. That means they're conservative. No. They are profit-seeking. And very often they are short-term profit-seeking. And that means they're risk-averse. And so if the left can be loud and obnoxious, then corporations will cave to them. And that's exactly what happened here. So in this letter, the CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, the president and CEO, he said, as Congress returns to session this month, the issue of gun safety is weighing heavily on the minds of many Americans. It certainly is for us at Walmart. Last month in El Paso, Texas, a gunman with an assault-style rifle launched a hate-filled attack in our store, shooting 48 people, resulting in the loss of 22 innocent lives. Now, he still can't define assault-style rifle because no one can, because it doesn't have a definition. Just a few days prior, 2 of our associates were shot and killed by another associate in our store in South Haven, Mississippi. So, I mean, that latter case is really not about access to guns, is it, per se? I mean, your own employees shot more of your employees. Our immediate priorities in the aftermath of those tragedies were supporting our associates and the impacted families and cooperating with law enforcement, says the CEO. In parallel, we have been focused on store safety and security. we've also been listening to people inside and outside our company as we think about the role we can play in helping to make the country safer. This is the CEO basically putting his neck out there on the chopping block for the left and saying, I bow before your every whim. Today, we shared several changes we are making at Walmart, says the CEO. We'll discontinue the sale of short barrel rifle ammunition, such as the .223 caliber and the 5.56 caliber that, while commonly used in some hunting rifles, can also be used in large capacity clips on military-style weapons. Okay, well, that makes no sense. Right? You're not selling the magazines, presumably. You're not violating federal law. And just because you could repurpose .223 ammo for use in a large capacity clip seems like a bad reason not to sell it to people who are not misusing it. He says, we'll discontinue the sale of handgun ammo. We'll discontinue handgun sales in Alaska, marking our complete exit from handguns. Is Alaska like a unique place? I'm just confused. He says, we hope you are aware we have previously made decisions to stop selling handguns and military-style rifles, such as the AR-15, to raise the age limit to purchase a firearm or ammo to 21, to require a green light on a background check, while federal law only requires the absence of red light, to videotape the point of sale for firearms, and to only allow certain trained associates to sell firearms. And again, this is all their prerogative. They're a private company. They can do what they want. Is it good for the country that corporations are caving to the few people on the left who seek to pressure them into doing their bidding? No, it's not good. It's bad when it comes to the sale of ammunition. It is bad when it comes to advertising on a wide variety of political programs. It is bad when it comes to general policy. Now, it is one thing. If you can mobilize the country behind a boycott of Walmart, and Walmart responds to that, that's one thing. But if this is just Walmart seeking to avoid a little bit of bad press from hosts at MSNBC that has no impact on their bottom line, then this is just obnoxious cavilling before the quote-unquote powers that be. They're also attempting to ban open carry of firearms into their stores or Sam's Clubs in states where open carry is permitted unless they are authorized law enforcement officers. And they call for gun control. They say, we believe we have been doing our part to make the country safer. And this is their plea to the left. Please leave us alone, guys. Please leave us alone. The prompt response from the left was, screw you. We're not leaving you alone. Kamala Harris says Walmart should do more. Elizabeth Warren says the same. They say Congress and the administration need to do their part as well. There are multiple bills before the House and Senate that address the issue of gun safety and are worth examining. So now Walmart is going to become what? A lobbying organization in favor of gun control? So basically, if you somehow buy off the Wokescold left and join their club, then maybe they'll leave you alone. Well, I have some bad news for Walmart. Left ain't going to leave them alone. You think that Bernie Sanders and the left are going to leave Walmart alone on their pay scale, on their pay structure, on their benefits? You think that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren aren't going to look to break up companies like Walmart so long as they bow before your whim? Good luck with that. Not going to happen. And here's the thing. Folks on the left would like to see this extended to every area of American life. So you can't even buy your ammo and your food and everything else that you want at Walmart together. Now you have to go to different stores for all of that, or a conservative alternative will begin. Andrew Ross Sorkin, columnist for the New York Times, he openly acknowledges he wants other corporations to start becoming political this way. He says, in his own open letter to Walmart employees, Mr. McMillan, who's the CEO, Doug McMillan, a boyish-looking 52-year-old from Jonesboro, Arkansas with a measured disposition. Oh boy, don't give him too much of a massage there. Said the company would stop selling ammunition used for handguns and military-style weapons, completely end the sale of handguns, and discourage anyone from carrying weapons in his store, even in open carry states. McMillan's move could prove to be a watershed. His decision to engage in a meaningful conversation about responsible gun sales in America could give license to other business leaders to enter the conversation. So a few things. One, you perpetuating a rule that impacts your consumers is not a meaningful conversation. Also, if your call is that all other corporations should simply mirror your political preferences, this is dangerous for the future of the country, guys. Again, it's all legal. Corporations can legally do what they want. Does that mean morally that corporations should now engage in the business of paternalistically deciding what customers should and should not have outside the bounds of what is legal? Of course, that's silly. But that's exactly what Andrew Ross Sorkin is calling for. We'll get to more of that in just 1 second. First, we need to remind you that you should go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. Why should you do this? Well, because as you see, the left would like to target advertisers. They would like to target corporations. They'd like to target anybody who disagrees with them. The way you protect the shows you love is by subscribing and helping us out and joining the club. You can do that over at dailywire.com. A Daily Wire subscription includes not only all 3 hours of this show commercial-free, you can also ask questions through the mailbag. You can watch live and recorded episodes of The Andrew Klavan Show, The Michael Knowles Show, The Matt Walsh Show, and much more. Plus, as part of a limited-time offer, you get the exclusive Leftist Tears tumbler. So you can drink those Leftist Tears, coffee, tea, whatever it is you're into, hot or cold, and you can look great doing it. Are you tired of just listening to this magnificent voice? You ready to see this truly great face? You want to watch or listen to the show at your desk while you pretend to do work? Head on over to dailywire.com, click on the subscribe button at the top of the page, and make the magic happen for yourself. All you have to do, go over to dailywire.com and click that subscribe button at the top of the page and join the club. It really does help us, and it helps all your favorite shows bring their content to you. So please go help us out by subscribing. It's, as I say, the New York Times, Andrew Ross Sorkin pushing openly for credit card companies to get into the business of deciding what you can and cannot spend money on, even within the boundaries of the law. He says, until now, many top executives in corporate America, with some notable exceptions, refused to acknowledge the roles they could play in curbing the epidemic of gun violence. They invariably pointed to politicians in Washington as the ones who are responsible for solving the crisis, which presumably, if you're looking for a collective solution, is correct. Because guess what? Let's say that Walmart does everything the left wants. You know what will happen tomorrow? A right-wing version of Walmart will open up and they will sell ammo under the prevailing laws. But that's not what Ross Sorkin wants. He says, for example, Al Kelly, the chief executive of Visa, whose network has been repeatedly used to carry out mass murders. I don't even know what that means. If that means that there are bad people who have used Visa, then I am sure that is true. There are also bad people who have used utilities. Does that mean that your utilities company has facilitated mass murder by providing electricity to somebody who's a bad person? But Ross Sorkin is blaming Visa. He says the chief executive of Visa has ducked any attempt to even discuss what his company could do to help. Mr. Kelly likes to say, as he did earlier this summer, we are in the business of facilitating legal commerce. That is what we do. Our job is not to set or interpret, but to follow the law. That, of course, is true. But that's not what the left wants. The left would like to activate corporations. And here's the thing. It is easier for a small group of motivated leftists to somehow capture the commanding heights of corporate CEOs than it is for them to win elections. It's difficult to pass legislation. It is very easy to bully a corporation into doing what you want by tweeting at them a half dozen times. And so this is what the left is set on doing. And it's gross and it's nasty. And it is going to cause greater cultural rifts. Because the things in America that cause cultural rifts are not just government policy. It is also creating a culture where everything is political. Your Visa card should not be political, and it should not be up to the head of Visa to determine what you can and cannot purchase inside the boundaries of the law. And by the way, if they do that, then conservatives will start their own Visa. Conservatives will start their own Walmart. What you will end up with, as I say, is a dual-track America in which everybody self-segregates politically speaking. And that ain't good for the conversation. It ain't good for the future of a republic. Basically, the private sector ends up as divided as the public sector does, except that you have elections in the public sector, and I guess you just spend your money with the people you agree with in the private sector. Kelly and other chief executives might want to study Mr. McMillan's example, says Andrew Ross Sorkin. He has chosen not to sell certain products even though they are legal. He says critics will argue that Mr. McMillan isn't going far enough. And it is true he could have gone further, for example, by endorsing a ban on assault weapons, rather than simply calling for a congressional debate. Another argument is that Walmart should stop selling guns altogether. But discontinuing all gun sales would only undermine the company's role in helping develop more responsible processes throughout the industry. My open letter to him suggested he continue to sell some guns because it would give him leverage over the system in a way that would be impossible otherwise. He says, hopefully the inspiration isn't confined to politicians or to Mr. McMillan. Which CEO will be next? Well, my hope is that CEOs say no. My hope is that CEOs say, listen, it is not our job to set policy. It is our job to ensure that we follow the law and that you have access to the products that are legal. The fact that all the same people who hate corporations, consider corporations to be evil, want corporations dissolved, say that corporations aren't people, right? You remember that from Citizens United, corporations aren't people? The same people say corporations not only are people, they should be the most moral people, and they should set all the standards for our society. It occurs to me that the left is wildly dishonest when it comes to these standards and that they have no standards at all. They simply have desired outcomes, and all they want is those outcomes achieved, no matter the cost to the general culture, society, or social fabric. Alrighty, coming up, Dave Chappelle comes under attack. Why? Well, he told some jokes. jokes are bad, we have found. The Wokescolds are coming for Dave Chappelle. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Well, Dave Chappelle is canceled. I know he still has a career. But here's the thing. The left is very angry at Dave Chappelle. And they're increasingly angry at every comedian who is not Hannah Gadsby, because the chief qualification for being a funny person, according to the left, is being deeply unfunny but woke. That's what they're looking for. Samantha Bee is like the best. Right? Samantha Bee, who has billboards all over Los Angeles that say, because she wants to win some sort of Emmy or something, there are billboards all over Los Angeles that say, get ready to vote for a woman, or get used to voting for a woman, for Samantha Bee, which is not a pitch for your humor. It's a pitch for your sex. She's very bad at her job. Hannah Gadsby, another perfect example. All the reviews of Hannah Gadsby are like, yeah, well, she's deeply unfunny, but isn't that really just us being conceited about our own definition of hilarity? In reality, shouldn't we just redefine humor so that Hannah Gadsby is funny? Sure, she sort of makes you want to bang your head against a wall, but shouldn't we then redefine banging your head against a wall as inherently not painful but humorous? I mean, sure, her humor is the equivalent of having somebody rotate a drill bit in your ear, but isn't that actually just like you enjoying things? Aren't you just defining humor too narrowly? So this is what they're doing now. So Dave Chappelle has a new special. The special is very funny. There's a lot in there that is funny. Now, a lot of it, for me, is over the top. The first segment of it, which is him defending Michael Jackson, kind of, was too much for me. But there's some other segments that are just as similarly politically incorrect and also extremely funny. He has a whole segment making fun of what he calls a Juicy Smollett, Jussie Smollett, that is very funny. He has a section where he talks about abortion that is really politically incorrect. He has a section where he talks about being a gun owner, and another section where he talks about the Wokescolds from what he calls the alphabet people, the LGBTQ left, who seek to destroy people's careers. He's specifically talking about Kevin Hart. All this stuff is the kind of stuff that ticks off the left. So the left does not assess whether it's funny or not because it's not funny. Don't tell jokes. Stop that. Instead, all of their reviews are about why Dave Chappelle is mean. Yeah, comedians are sometimes mean, man. Like, that's the way it works. The question is, are they also funny? Like, I can acknowledge Jon Stewart was a funny person. He also was very mean to pretty much all of my political beliefs, but he's funny. But listen to some of these reviews, okay? Inku Kang, writing for Slate. Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones fights for the rights of the already powerful. Now, you may notice that title has nothing to do with whether it's funny or not. You may notice that title is all about Dave Chappelle's politics, but this is exactly the point. In his new Netflix special, Chappelle rushes to the defense of the people who need it most. Celebrities, says Inku Kang. Watching Dave Chappelle's latter-day comedy specials, the most recent of which was released on Monday, is like dropping in on a rascally uncle who doesn't know or doesn't care how much he's disappointing you. Well, he doesn't care how much he's disappointing you. He's worth tens of millions of dollars. He's way funnier than you. And he's the one who gets paid to tell jokes while you get paid minimal amounts of money to write crappy pieces for Slate. So I'm not sure why he should care. Maybe he was a favored relative once, says Inku Kang. The kind of eyebrow-wagging scamp who made the other grown-ups uncomfortable just to entertain you, but also gave you peeks into adult complexity that few others would. He was more clever than anyone you'd met up until that point, and there was something impressive about the lengths he'd go to make you laugh. Then he went away for a long time. And while you changed with the times, he fashioned himself a badge of honor for defiantly not doing so. Now his jokes make you wince. So in other words, all of the old Chappelle fans, they developed as human beings, but Dave Chappelle, he's retrograde. He's stuck in the past. Or alternatively, you've become absolutely insufferable. Maybe over the past few years, you are so insufferable it's impossible to tell you people a joke. People on the left, impossible. She says, the soundness of their logic is intact as ever, his jokes, but they're seldom informed by facts or new perspectives. Each visit reminds you that your face is technically capable of laughing and cringing at the same time, but it certainly doesn't feel good to do so. Despite it all, Uncle Dave insists it's not his viewpoints that have gotten stale. Everyone's just gotten so much more sensitive. But that's true. Everyone has gotten more sensitive. We live in a stupid, idiotic society in which we pretend that if you call a biological woman she, that this is somehow inherently offensive. We live in a society so ridiculous that we are supposed to pretend that it is more of an intrusion on women's rights to suggest that they not kill babies than to suggest that perhaps Aziz Ansari was not responsible for a Me Too moment after having consensual sex with a person. Yes, you guys got more sensitive. Chappelle is correct. Slate says, in his fifth Netflix special, titled Sticks and Stones, Chappelle rails against the perceived softness of many different groups. Louis C.K.'s victims, Kevin Hart's detractors in the gay community, Michael Jackson's survivors, whom he says he doesn't believe anyway. Chappelle also directs his exasperation at his own audience, or at least the kinds of viewers who aren't interested in supporting artists and celebrities responsible for horrendous things. He says, if you do anything wrong in your life and I find out about it, I'm going to try to take everything away from you. You're effing finished. And he says that speaks for the audience. That's true. This person doesn't like it because that's too close to home. And it's not the only review like that. The Ringer has a review says, Dave Chappelle's provocations have turned predictable. In other words, you liked it when Dave Chappelle seemed to be attacking folks on the right more than folks on the left. But now that Dave Chappelle is attacking the Wokescold culture that destroys careers on a daily basis, now you don't like it anymore. Now you're mad and it's not funny to you. Or maybe you guys have no sense of humor about yourselves because being a Wokescold relies on you being a scold. But being a Wokescold relies on you being humorless and annoying. And that's why comedians are moving away from you. Hell, Sarah Silverman, who's as woke as it's possible to be, is proclaiming that the Wokescolds annoy her now. Welcome to the world where comedians no longer respect you because you're too annoying. You want to generate little right-wingers? This is a pretty easy way to do it, is to continue being so annoying that Dave Chappelle is too terrible for you. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show.